And then I'll just break in after 10 seconds or so. Go ahead. At the pianist is Youri Egorov, who is here at the University of Missouri at Kansas City for a recital as part of the Pianist Series. That series extending throughout the month of February. At the keyboard right now, he's presenting a composition that he played during his recital when he did all 12 of the Debussy preludes from Book 1. And this is the number 1 Dansus de Delphes, the Dance of the Delphs. It's a piece of some Grecian and classic antiquity proportions from Debussy. And I asked Mr. Egorov if he would perform that for us now, because it's the kind of music that maybe we do not readily associate with a man who has been called a virtuoso pianist. Now, I'm just going to move right on in here and unceremoniously interrupt Mr. Egorov. Welcome to our microphones. Thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us.
Thank you very much.
French piano music constituted fully 1/2 of your recital last
Yes.
night here in White Recital Hall, all 12 of the Debussy preludes. And then for your encore, you also did another Debussy piece from the Estampe. Is French piano music becoming, or has it already been, a very important part of your repertoire?
I must say that since 3 years ago, I'm very fascinated by music of Impressionists, Debussy and Ravel, because I find that the most abstract imaginations of the composers are extremely well put in the score, and it gives me certain images which I imagine in my mind.
Well, as I watched you perform, I like to watch pianists as well as listen to them,
Yes.
of course, and especially in between each of the preludes, you paused, sometimes at great length. It was as if you were recovering yourself or preparing for the next or still reflecting upon what you had just played. What is going through your mind?
Oh, I think it's everything together. Some preludes are very difficult technically, so after this prelude, I have to have some rest because my muscles are tired, and I have to change my mind to a completely different mood.
Mm-hmm.
For example, after this, the west wind. After this, you have an extremely different mood of the girl with the
Flaxen hair.
Yes. So it takes some time to forget the piece before and concentrate on the following piece.
Does it mean that it's especially challenging then to present all 12 of these at once?
I think they should be played, all of them at once. I think they have a certain sequence which Debussy puts them. I mean, it seems to me very logical how he puts all 12 together.
I was especially struck by the Footprints in the Snow, which must be one of the more imaginatively titled of the preludes.
Yes.
You yourself seemed so wrapped up in it that it was almost as if you were reluctant to leave it when you completed it. Do you remember that? Was there something special going on? I've talked to other people in the audience who also sensed that.
You know, I must tell you that it's one of my favorite preludes from this book. And for me, it's extremely abstract vision. The steps on the snow, it is completely lonely landscape, just with the snow, and you see, it is very sad also to me. It is extremely sad music.
Well, and the utter simplicity of it, at least to our ear, it seems simple. Now, to you, that's a different story, isn't it?
Yes, to me it's a different story. It is completely still landscape. It doesn't have any movement in it, to my imagination.
Could we have an example from the opening page?
Yes, of course. I must tell you also that Debussy puts a lot of commas in between the phrases, which means that it is they're all sections of the piece. So here we are. And so on.
Indeed, and as I was watching you, Youri, you take as much care in performing something like this in an impromptu fashion with me and the microphone than you did last night. It's as if technique and musicianship will never leave, no matter how casual the practice. Is that
Yeah.
is that a tough thing to keep remembering, that always the musicianship, always?
Always. Well, it's a matter of analyzing the score very much. And to do extremely precise in all the details. And to know exactly why you do it. You have to have a very, very good reason to do it. So that's how it goes for me.
In the case of the Schumann music that you performed in the first half of the concert, especially the Kreisleriana, which is as formidable a piece as I think any pianist will ever be called upon to do, there are times when you have to be almost abandoned and wild,
Yes.
and yet in control. I'm amazed. How do you do that? How do you let it go, and yet how do you keep it in check all the time?
Well, it is, I must tell you again, that it's a matter of hard work before. And the methods you are working with. For example, the beginning of the Kreisleriana technically is extremely difficult.
And you also play it maybe faster than I've ever heard it done before, and it takes
Yes.
on a whole dimension when it's almost reckless like that.
Yes, so when I start practicing it, I do it extremely slow because I find the melody in this very fast piece very, very fascinating and interesting, because if you play it slowly, you can hear it better, how wonderful the melody is.
Youri, could we pretend that we are in your workshop and that you are approaching the first of the Kreisleriana pieces? Could you play
Yes.
it at the slow rate of speed that you referred to and then build it up so that we can see the difference in how it sounds? Would you do that for us?
Of course, I would prefer them to start slow and then
Indeed.
stop and play it in fast tempo.
Very good. Okay. Now, at this point, it's obvious to me that you have to develop fingers of steel here, because not only must they be accurate, but they must be powerful.
Yes.
Now, that speed was about at what percentage of your finished product?
I couldn't say. Let's say as 3 times slower as I play it in concert.
Now, in one of these programs earlier, Emmanuel Axe told me that when he practiced at that rate of speed, he rarely permitted himself the luxury to cut loose, as it were, until maybe concert time. I asked him, how do you fight that temptation to want to go ahead and play it faster? And he said he has to fight it all the time. And I'm curious to get your reaction about that.
Well, I must tell you that a week, or let's say 1.5 weeks before a concert, when I practice at home, I already tried to play it as I would play it in the concert. So I play it in full speed and see what mistakes I make, and I try to correct it then.
Well, now that we've heard it at the slower pace, maybe we could hear now what it sounds
Yes.
like on the concert platform. Okay.
Oh, excuse me, the last chord was
What?
not good. The last chord was not good.
Now, that is as fast as I think. Well, maybe you could play it faster, but what would be the point? This way, it's clear, and yet it's still almost headlong, and that's so
Yes.
important for Schumann.
Yes, I wouldn't play it faster. I think that for me it is the tempo which is comfortable for me, and still you can hear the melody.
Now, by kind of contrast with this, the very last piece in this
Yes.
set called the
The
Kreisleriana.
most difficult.
Yes, there are some very subtle grace notes, I guess they could be called, or ornamental notes
Yes.
going on when you
Yes.
skip across. One, philosophically, what do you make of this last piece? It would almost seem to be anticlimactical after the seventh.
Yes, Schumann writes, I think, in one of his letters, that his image about this last number 8, is that the crazy Chrysler is running away from...
That's the character from E.T.A.
Yes,
Hoffman, right?
yes. That he is completely crazy. He's running, jumping, and making soap bubbles.
I wasn't
So-
aware that he had said that, but it
Yes,
fits perfectly.
Yes. For me, it is exactly the picture I see.
But, you know,
So-
to me, what the craziest part of that piece is what's going on in the bass. The left
Yes.
hand has a very odd presence throughout, doesn't it?
Yes.
Almost as if it were wandering around or
Yeah.
something.
Well, even in the score, in Urtext of Kreisleriana, Schumann writes the bass ad libitum, which means that you could actually, and there are some people which say that you can play the bass as you want. You know.
Could we have a sense of how this sound is at whatever rate that you would prefer to play it? But we can get a sense of where the bass is throughout all of this.
Yes.
I know what I'd like. Could you play it slowly enough that we can appreciate more clearly all of the little ornamental things going on in the right hand? I'd love to watch it as well, if I may. There must be times as you accelerate this where you gnash your teeth at those ornamental notes, because it must be very difficult to keep them clear.
It is extremely difficult. So if you just practice it as many times as possible, slowly, and you make sure that in pianissimo your fingers are still very, very sensitive and active, that you don't lose this 16. You know,
Yet something in your muscles probably would rather it just be done away with, I
Yes,
suppose.
yes.
Before we leave Schumann, let me throw another quote at you that another pianist has told me. John Browning said that in his opinion, Schumann is a pianist's composer, maybe more than an audience's composer. That pianists are especially equipped to enjoy the fruits of Schumann's work. What do you think he would mean by that? Would you agree with that?
Well, I think in certain way he is very, very right. There are some pieces not only written by Schumann, for example, let's take Bartók. second violin sonata for violin and piano. Some pieces of Schumann too. They're more fun to play than to hear. I agree with it very, very much.
And in some ways, they're very intellectual, aren't they? There's a tough mind at work behind what's happening, too.
Yes. So I think the people who hear it for the first time, second time, it is still a little bit difficult for them to understand everything precisely.
I'm going to switch gears for a moment and ask you, for one thing, you're only, 30 years old now, correct? 29 or 30?
Almost 30. Yeah.
All right. Now, and yet you have attained a stature and a critical acclaim that most pianists never achieve in their lifetimes. How do you feel when a recording will come out, say, of the Kreisleriana on Peter's label, and you'll have a critic saying, this may likely be the best Kreisleriana we will ever have on records? That's a pretty impressive credential.
Yes.
Do you pay attention to that, or do you just sort of shake it off and disregard critics generally?
I don't disregard critics at all. I actually, as a matter of fact, I like to read what they're writing about me or about other musicians, about reviewing an opera or a ballet. It is very, very interesting. But after all, I must tell you that I think most of the artists, they know themselves what is good or what is not good, what went good at the concert or what could be better. You know, most of them, I think, know themselves. So
you know, that's
the how would you say it? The toughest critics for themselves, of course.
You know, it's refreshing to hear a performer admit that what a critic can say just might have a little value, because self-reflection and self-examination is sometimes very important, isn't it?
Yes.
I want to remind everyone, in case you've just tuned in, we are at the keyboard at the Steinway with Youri Egorov. Now, let me get the pronunciation of your last name correct.
Yes.
Say it for me, please.
Well, it is Youri Egorov.
Yegorov.
Yes.
And let me tell you, there's about maybe 100 women in the auditorium last night wondering if you are married. And so on their behalf, I'm going to ask you that question.
No, I'm not married.
And your home is in Amsterdam, I believe.
It is, yes.
Now, what nationality are you at the present time? I'm curious.
I have no nationality at the present time.
How does that work politically for you when you travel from country to country? Are there ever any difficulties with passports and such as that? What are the
Not
politics
really.
of that?
I have a very nice document, a travel document from the United Nations, which is very well known in each country. So I don't have any problems with it.
In Russia, you studied with a pianist that I've admired, certainly by means of his recordings, Yakov Zak.
Yes.
Tell me something about what kind of teacher and what kind of man he is or was. Is he still alive, do you know?
No, he died 4 years ago.
Uh-huh.
He was a wonderful teacher. Not only in music, in everything. We had discussions about paintings from Giotto to Jackson Pollock, let's say. Literature, poetry. And we became very, very good friends in the last years of my studies in Moscow. He was ill already, so he would not go to the conservatory to give his classes, but he would invite his students to come to his home, which was filled from wall to ceilings with books, records, everything. He has a big apartment in Moscow and enormous library and collections of recordings. Like he had all recordings of Horowitz, all recordings of Richter, all recordings of Michelangelo, plus symphonic music of Brahms played by Toscanini, Furtwängler, you name it. He had everything.
What were some of the things in which he was toughest on you as a performer that maybe now you would thank him about?
About producing the sound, I must say, and interpretation.
By producing the sound, you mean where the muscular action comes from?
Yes.
That kind of thing?
Yes.
Because I notice on stage you are completely relaxed. There is not a sense of rigidness anywhere.
Well, I think it's one of the secrets of playing piano. As Vladimir Horowitz said, the secret is in that your muscles are completely relaxed while you are playing. If you have tension in your muscles, the sound will be very hard and harsh.
When you are maybe having some time to yourself, and you have the luxury of saying, a certain pianist is in town, I'm going to drop everything and go hear him.
Oh, I love it.
Who would that be? Who are some of the pianists that you admire most right now?
Oh, there are many. Pollini, Ashkenazi, Arau from the old generation, Marta Argerich, Ivo Pogorelic.
Yes, he's
Andras
been achieving
Schiff.
a lot of currency
Yes.
lately.
Oh, there are many good pianists, and if I have time, I go to concerts with a lot of pleasure. It's nice to go to a concert and listen instead
indeed.
of playing.
We are also blessed these days with a multitude of recordings in which a lot of piano composers are being rediscovered by a new generation. Are there any composers for the keyboard that you yourself are very fond of, but maybe have been unjustly neglected by a lot of pianists? Or individual works?
Well, I'm now interested very much in Boulez's music.
Ah.
Next year, in my program, I'm going to play his second piano sonata.
What kind of a sound are we talking about? A purely atonal sound, or?
It is, yes, it's purely atonal, and you can call it, it sounds very chaotic, but it is extremely well organized. You
Would there
will
be something,
find,
something you could share from us?
not now, I'm
Uh-huh.
sorry.
In fact,
go
I'm
to
not
score
familiar at
and-
all with
yes,
this.
Yeah. It is very concentrated music in all ways, in emotions, in sounds, in tempos. I like it.
In just a few moments, you are going to be addressing an auditorium full of students
Yes.
for something called a lecture demonstration. Now, is that kind of what we're doing right now, or what is a lecture demonstration to you? I'm excited yet.
Well, I think I'm just going to talk about music with students, and I want to talk about relationship between teacher and student, and I want to tell about my relationship with my professor Yakov Zak in
Aha.
Moscow, and maybe then I can answer questions. Maybe I can demonstrate something on the piano.
How important a part of your life is teaching right now?
I don't teach at all, I must say, because I simply don't have time for it. I have a very busy schedule with concerts.
Let's ask you to be both performer and critic now. For example, last night's recital, which I thought was eminently satisfying. Now, how tough are you on yourself, typically, after recital? And maybe could you critique for us last night's recital? Would you be comfortable with that?
Yes, I must tell you that you are never 100% satisfied with your concert. I think no artist is. And of course, you know what kind of mistakes you did, and next time you try to correct them. In total, I was pleased, I must say, in total. But of course, there are certain details which I didn't like.
What about more general? Well, wait a minute, I can't pass that up. For
Yeah.
example, what kind of detail would you, and maybe you could show us?
What kind of detail?
Would it be the kind of detail that an audience or the listener might have even not noticed, but only you would have known?
It could be. For example, I was not very satisfied with the intermission number 2 from second number of Kreisleriana. This one. In the end, the second half of it. made certain mistakes which were not necessary there. And some of the dynamics were not right, not as I wanted it to be.
Let's deal with this second piece, because in some ways maybe it's the most remarkable of all of the 8, I think. There is a passage after the second episode that gradually leads you back to the main theme, which is originally heard in octaves. That passage almost looks as if Schumann were abandoning any idea of tonality at all. It's as if he is wandering around.
Remarkable.
It really is.
Yes.
And maybe we've never had a chance to hear it by itself and can appreciate really how forward-looking that episode is.
Well, I think this episode is kind of a connection between the second intermezzo to go back to the original, this theme. But the modulations are amazing. I love it very much.
It's almost as if he were sort of musing to himself, or some very inward kind of dialogue or monologue maybe going on.
Yes.
I'm very greedy, I know, but would it be possible to hear just a little of that?
Of course.
Could you pick it up at
With
that
pleasure.
point where you have just completed that second intermezzo and are gradually working back to the opening material?
Yes.
Okay. Who among us would not readily change places with you, Youri? That's amazing, and it's so nice to have a chance to appreciate passages like that maybe in concert they go by before we can fully understand them.
Yes.
And taking time with us like this is such a joy. And before we go, and we're about out of time, I'm curious about things like what your family life is like at home. Do you have hobbies away from the keyboard? Are you a great reader as well?
I love to read very much, especially on a long tour like I'm having now. I got many, many books, Russian books, I must tell, written by Russian modern writers who are not published in Russia, but they are published here.
Yeah.
I love to visit museums.
Well, I hope you'll have a chance to visit our Nelson Gallery here.
Yes, I hope so too.
The Oriental collection.
Yes, I heard about it already. I like movies very much, good movies.
Have there been any good movies, in your opinion, about classical performers? I'm thinking now of the movie Competition, for example.
Oh, I think I saw it. I didn't like it very much. But I hear that there is a new Fellini movie about musicians.
Aboard an ocean line. Well, and there's orchestra rehearsal, too.
Orchestra rehearsal too, which I didn't see yet. But I am extremely interested in it. I'm going to see it in New York when I'm back.
Has it ever been suggested to you by any film producers to make documentaries or any kind of other filmic material about your work?
No, no.
To commit to film what it is that you do?
No.
Would you be interested in such a project? Either a filmed recital or maybe just an interview dialogue with you as well as performance materials.
Yes. Well, if it would be someone like you,
well,
I would do it
we've
with
got
pleasure.
cameras waiting out on the wings. No, not really. We really must go, and I'm wondering, it's shameful to take pieces apart maybe like this, but you know, the epilogue to the Arabeske is one of the most marvelous pages, I think, in all of Schumann.
Yes.
And as I thank Youri Egorov for taking time to talk with me here in the green room on KXTR at the keyboard of the Steinway, I want to wish you well in all of your travels, and thank you for the recital last night, it was just some of the most marvelous musicianship I've had the good fortune to encounter. And I want to thank you so much, and maybe I can talk you into that last page from the Arabesque.
With pleasure.
Youri Egorov.